A Gathering of Soldiers. Written by Martin Hicks. Narrated by Steve Miller. Prologue. The road that led from Eden Station over to the Stringer place was really only worthy of the name in certain stretches of its length. On these, the broader parts, the way was just about wide enough for two horsemen to comfortably pass each other, or for a cart or wagon to negotiate its way without one or another of its wheels encroaching into the grass or other growths of the verges. This was the reason why Daniel Ryan always brought Hal Bennett's narrower cart, with Jenny, the more docile older mare, harnessed to it on these occasional errands to the Stringers. The vehicle itself reminded him of a little trotting trap from the old country, with a pretty narrow wheelbase and a lightweight construction. But, while it was comfortably able to negotiate these better portions of the road, even it found itself tested by some of the other parts. In the twisting bottom areas were the creeks and streams, which would ultimately add their volume to the Ogeechee or Canoochee rivers, eddied and gurgled on their often meandering ways. The vegetation, which thrived in the moist dankness, tended to spread, constricting the road and rendering the passage of these stretches more difficult still. The areas of smelly bottomland mud and slime down here would persist in all but the driest spells of weather, making the job of washing down Jenny's legs and other parts of her coat and the cart itself, when back at the store, a lengthier process as a result. But these bottomlands around the river margins were often where the poorer white families subsisted, scrambling their living from an often unforgiving nature, while their social betters, the Fosters, the Brooks, and the Arrowsmiths, made an easier and infinitely more prosperous living on their larger, better acreages with their plantation crops. The Stringers inclined much more towards the former rather than the latter group, but they kept largely to themselves, and they were prompt enough pairs, so nothing was ever said about the inconvenience of their road. On this spring day, as Daniel made his way back from the Stringer place, his mind was diverted from the mundane trials of the narrow way by the sight of a walker up ahead. A man, out here on this sparingly used and never busy stretch of backway, just beyond the narrow, muddy stretch that Daniel and Jenny were negotiating. Daniel knew he must have joined the road from one of the obscure and overgrown back paths, of which there were a few around here. He glanced at the fellow traveler several times as he approached, unable to gaze at him and fully take his measure, through having to keep his eye on the continuing hazards of the road. But as he cleared the narrower wooded part and emerged into the sunlight, he was able to scrutinize the figure up ahead in greater detail. The man, when one took the time to assess him, was only just half, if at all. He was young, but did not look like any of the local boys, even though, since they were going in the same direction, Daniel could not see his face. But there was something about his gait that indicated youth, a gangling sort of a walk, loose-limbed and spare. He was also thin, and on his person he wore an outfit that suggested poor white to any observer who was familiar with this portion of northern Georgia. Perched on his head was a straw hat, with fraying around the part of its edge that could be seen. On his upper frame he wore a shirt of faded brown and red check, which was clearly too large for him from the ample rolls of spare sleeve collected around his elbows. Over his shoulder he carried a rolled gray bundle on a rawhide strap. His pants were of a brown shade, faded like the shirt, and looking like a homespun cotton manufacture to Daniel. And of course the boy was barefoot. Even before he drew up closer to him, Daniel had seen the prints in the dirt, back there in the damper parts of the road, which told the tale, with this being confirmed as he came nearer. Up ahead, the boy had noticed the cart's approach, and had glanced behind several times since hearing the noise of the wheels and hoofs, and now, as it was almost up to him, he stepped off the road to the left into the verge of the spring grass and other growth, removing his hat as Daniel drew abreast. Daniel nodded to him as he passed, feeling, for a moment, that unworthy little notion of superiority. Through
Sample complete. Ready to continue?